We're back with six-time Mr. Olympia, Dorian Yates. And Dorian, part 1 and 2 was so hugely successful that we got to do a part 3 and 4 with you. And I'm glad that you're able to come back and talk to us a little bit about life after bodybuilding, which is what we're going to concentrate on today.
I enjoyed the interview, and feedback's been great from many people. I even got Big Rick. We mentioned a big Italian guy that trained with Lee Haney for the '91 Olympia.
Yeah.
And he actually got in touch with me, and I can't pronounce his second name, Italian name, but anyway, Big Rick. So shout out to Big Rick. He's been in touch with me. He heard the show, and he said exactly that was exactly that you know, he trained with Haney that year, and Haney gave it his best, and he had a big, strong training partner because he knew somebody was coming along that could possibly give him trouble. So anyway, shout out to you, Rick.
Were you, I just wanted to ask you this one follow-up question to the Olympia. When you were going for that, Olympia title, no one from England had ever won the Olympia. Was that a big obstacle that you thought maybe would not be surpassed or surmounted?
Well, Dave, I came from England. I was a British champion, and I was going to compete as a pro in the States. And I just heard of so many people like, you're not going to do well over there because you don't know the judges, you don't know the people, they don't know you, all this stuff. And, I disproved that already at the Night of Champions, that was not the case.
Right.
I was, I got second place there, and, was very much accepted by the judges and the crowd and everybody. So I kind of really didn't believe that. To a degree, perhaps these things can matter, but I generally think if you're good enough, you're good enough, and I just didn't listen to that. So it was the same thing going for the Olympia at that point. I kind of psychologically was accepting that I could win it.
Yeah. One more also question I had about Nasser El Sonbaty, because Nasser was very, very critical of you. I think you were very intimidating to him. That's how I interpreted it. But he would, had all kinds of names to you, like Backzilla, and he would put down the fact that, you had weak body parts and stuff like that. How did you deal with Nasser? Did you ignore him, or what was your feelings about Nasser as a bodybuilder and as a person?
I don't know, man. I don't really listen to what other people say too much. And, Nasser came really, at the tail end of my career.
Yeah.
So he's not somebody that I paid a great deal of attention to until probably like 95, 96, when I saw he was coming up. He put a lot more size on and he started to look impressive. But as far as any criticisms or gossip and everything, he never came to my face to say anything. So, and I'm not one to go reading bullshit on the internet and so on. So I don't really care. I'm not really aware of whatever he said. When I saw him, he was very polite, but that was Nasser all over.
Yeah.
He'd be very nice to your face and then stab you in the back. So I think that. So I don't feel offended if he did it to me as well.
Yeah. No. So what do you think about when you see guys like Phil Heath, who's now a 7-time Mr. Olympia, and he's responding to social media guys calling him out on videos and after the Olympia and getting all upset about what people are saying about him? What do you think about that?
Well, everyone's got their own approach, but I don't think that's very professional, man. I think a champion should just concentrate on what he's doing. And if some people like you, some people won't like you. It comes with the territory, right? So don't get into it, and that's just taking a ton of your time and energy in a negative way, trying to tell people, how great you are or whatever. People either like you or they don't like you, and fans are entitled to their opinion. That's part of it, right? Just
Absolutely.
Like if you like baseball or basketball or football, you like one team, you don't like the other team. That's just part of it, right? So there's some people out there that think Dorian Yates was shit and he was the worst Mr. Olympia ever and blah, 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 whatever. It doesn't make any difference to me. It's just their opinion, and so I would never get into that arguing with fans. I mean, it's like a champion should be up here. He should be a champion. He should behave like a champion and like don't get down in the dirt, rolling in the dirt with everybody.
Right. Now, Dorian, when you stopped competing, obviously, you know, you had a real high for 6 years. You were on top of the world. You were the greatest bodybuilder of all time. You stopped competing, and it's got to be somewhat of a letdown. How do you deal with that? How did you deal with it emotionally, you know, once you were off stage?
Somewhat of a letdown is probably the understatement of the century, in my experience anyway. Because I took control of my life when I was very young. I took control of it. I took control of my destiny. I took control of my bodybuilding career, apart from one contest that I was persuaded to go in very earlier on. You know, I planned everything. I made all my decisions. And you know, I like to be in control. So I would have liked to control my exit from bodybuilding as well, but that didn't happen because I got injured and boom, that's it. It's over. And I'd kept myself very isolated in England training all these years, and now I'm deciding I can't compete in the Mr. Olympia, announce my retirement, and then I'm sitting back in England. I'm just like, I mean, I really know who I was. And this is what I've done since I was, you know, since I was 20 years old. Is my whole life, my whole destiny, tunnel vision. I had very little. I had no social life. Very little life outside of it because I just gave it 100%, and all of a sudden, all this is gone. Yeah, and not only that, that was compounded by the fact that something we should discuss because it's not discussed a lot, but the psychological effects of taking steroids and then not taking steroids and how this affects you psychologically, I think is massive. Yeah, and I think a lot of people suffer from psychological issues, depression, and so on, when they're coming off steroids, because you're on all this male hormone that makes you feel very positive, and you get used to that. And then, at least in my case, because I'm this character that's very extreme, I always told myself, I'm doing this, I'm taking these steroids and whatever because it's my profession and I have to do it, right? So when I'm not doing this profession anymore, I won't do it anymore. And that was it. I just, from one day to the next, I just stopped, and I didn't do. You know, I didn't really taper off. I didn't take ACG. It was just like extreme, like, that's it, fuck it, I'm stopping. And, you know, I even went to see an endocrinologist in UK, and I had a conversation with him. And at the end of the conversation, he looked at me and he said, to be honest, Dorian, you probably know more than me about this. And I was like, well, that's fucking helpful, right? Like, you know, I'm talking to an endocrinologist here, but he didn't have an experience with strength athlete or bodybuilder or whatever, who's been taking steroids for years and stopped taking them and so on. So I think it needs to be discussed, and people need to be careful when they're taking, or, you know, and they're coming off. And it's not my subject because I'm Mr. Olympia, but I mean, with the women, it's like 100 times worse. And I think you're going to see a lot of people with psychological issues when they get older and they're not taking these hormones anymore. So yeah, I came off, and I suffered from a severe clinical depression, which was compounded by things going on in my life, which were, you know, ending career. My marriage was falling apart. I get divorced. Somebody close to me died. There was a whole lot of stuff going on that was enough to make anyone depressed anyway, and that was compounded with me having like normal testosterone and so on. So it was really a pretty tough time for me all around.
What wound up happening? Did they put you on hormone replacement?
I put myself on hormone replacement. Eventually, I kind of worked it out for myself. But the care and whatever you got in UK is not, you know, you don't even have anybody that deals with steroids and so on. Back in the 90s, now you probably get some people that could help you out. But
sure.
Then there was very little help. So I was kind of on my own, and I worked it out on my own. That's what I needed in the end.
Dorian, how tough was that, you know, to have your marriage end at that point? And what do you think, you know, initiated that? Was it the fact that you completely changed your whole routine, so to speak?
Well, yeah, and the fact that I had such severe tunnel vision, it was probably things that I should have addressed or I wasn't that happy with, but it's like, I'm getting ready for the Olympia here, or I'm doing this, I'm doing that. So you kind of like, in England we say, you put it under the carpet, you put it under the rug, and later on there's a big lump under the rug and you got to deal with it. So it was like that, relationships are like that over a time. People change and, they go in different directions. That happens. I think 50% of marriages end in divorce and so on. So it's not that unusual. But the fact that we were kind of working together as a team, Deb, my wife at the time, was very supportive of my career. And perhaps that was the glue that was holding us together longer than it would have normally been in the normal circumstances. So when that glue was gone, then, you start dealing with all the issues, and, we decided that it wasn't working, so we separated.
Dorian, in your book, From the Shadows, which, by the way, is available where? On Amazon.com now?
It's available on fromtheshadow.com. Is just available on my own sales platform at the moment. And it's important to note, because some people are saying, oh, this book's expensive. The first edition is only 1,000 books have been printed, and these are numbered editions. So number 1 of 999, which I've got, I keep that. I've got number 1. So the numbered edition will be more valuable in the future. For instance, I had, you might remember my first book, Blood and Guts.
Yes, I have it.
Which it's just a paperback, and it wasn't limited edition, it wasn't numbered, anything like that. And just because we stopped printing it now, it's worth like 10, 15 times face value on eBay. So the idea was to produce a numbered copy, which is limited. So only 1,000 of these with the special number in there
Gotcha.
and are going to be made ever. Once they're sold, and we will produce, regular paperbacks and ebooks and everything like that, which will be more affordable if that's a problem for people. But so that's the situation at the moment. We've got limited edition books available until they sell through, and then we're going to do another edition, which will be cheaper, but won't be numbered. It won't be a collector's item.
Right.
So, if it's costly for you now, then just wait a little while. There'll be other ones coming, but I think it's worth getting the numbered copy because it's like an investment. It's going to increase in value.
There you go. Now, in the book, your son Lewis was quoted as saying, quote, "Some of the things you said were out of order, basically saying you could have hired a maid and a cook. Mom stood by you, helped you with the food, the posing, and was always there for you." Was that a tough statement for you to hear?
No, not really, because, whatever shit I said, I had to, she had said to me as well. It's like that when people break up and they get bad feeling. People say things, perhaps they shouldn't say, or they don't really mean, and so on. So that was just an incident of that, and we left it in the book just to illustrate that. But, I'm sure I said things that weren't that nice. I'm sure she said things that weren't that nice. And that's just it's just life, man. Anybody that's in a relationship and it breaks up is not going to be all, nice and roses at that point. We have a great relationship now, me and Debbie. We talk, we do 2 kids together, and it's cool. But when you wake up, there's going to be a lot of bad feeling. People are going to say shit. So I said stuff, she said stuff, we're all human.
Yeah, I hear you. Now, I think I remember correctly. Hadn't you guys broken up, and then she got pregnant with your daughter?
Well, yeah, it was pretty much like that. Like we'd decided that we were going to separate, but Lewis was still at school, and we're trying to maintain the household until he left school in a couple of months. So we're still living together, and we had started the process, but. Still living together in the same house, babe. So some old habits die hard, and that's how my daughter was conceived. So at the last minute, and then it was when we got the news, it's well, what do you do now? Because now there's a new factor in the equation now. But there's a new factor in the equation. There's a child coming along, but it doesn't change the situation, and it's not a reason, it can't mend the relationship if it's not working. Sure. So we decided to carry on. So that was tough. on everybody. Probably tougher on Debbie, being that she's pregnant at the time. But you know, it worked out. I got 2 great kids. My daughter's 17 now. She's doing real well at school.
Crazy.
And as I said, me and Debbie got a good relationship, and so on. So everything's cool now.
I guess you got your body working again, Dorian, at that point.
Well, that's the funny thing. I mean, my testosterone was on the floor, but I still had some sex drive from somewhere. So I don't know how anyone can explain that, but I was still functional, even though my testosterone was like normal for a woman, I think.
You weren't Superman, but you still were a man enough to get the job done.
Yeah.
Now, Dorian, I've heard you quote before on I think it was another interview you did that, quote, "We live in a virtual reality world where we create your own reality with your thoughts."
Yeah.
You know, I love that quote. I think it's a great quote. I really believe in it wholeheartedly. Explain what you mean by that.
Well, it's something that I kind of instinctively knew anyway. I mean, you go back, I did a DVD with Mark Dugdale. He came out to film at Temple Gym years ago. I don't know how long ago now. Maybe it's 10 or 12 years ago. And I said the same thing more or less then, that life is like a movie. You know, your life is your movie and you're the director, and you kind of like play the scenes and the whole story from your thoughts somehow. And more I learn about spirituality and the studies I've done over the years and stuff. And now, of course, you know, you've got quantum physicists actually saying the same thing. You got Professor Gates, I think it's from the States anyway. Professor Gates is a quantum physicist. And apparently they've broken it down like reality is at its deepest quantum level is just computer code. It's zeros and ones. So that's, you know, everything we see at some level is like the Matrix. It's like, it's not actually real. It's like the most sophisticated virtual reality game you could be in, and we're in it. And if it sounds crazy, then sorry about that. But, you know, smarter people than me that are saying what I was already saying instinctively. I know that your thoughts have a massive effect on your reality, and if you're thinking negative shit seems to happen to you more, right?
Yep.
You know, and you think, you know, you get a negative spiral going down, and the same thing thinking positive. So it's really helpful and very important to know what you're thinking, first of all. Most people don't even know what they're thinking. They're just automating and totally unconscious. So once you can slow things down and get some kind of handle on your thoughts, and we all have negative thoughts, but it's to recognize that and try and check it before it gets out of control, and the positive thoughts to like encourage them and use them to improve your life, your experience.
I think that's 100% accurate. As a matter of fact, they've done experiments where they've shown that on a quantum level, like you were saying, with neutrons and electrons and protons, and they shoot these beams of electrons. Where the electrons go is dependent on what the observer is expecting, and they could actually change where they go based on. So our thoughts definitely can influence the quantum world. So obviously, it could obviously affect the world we live in, the macro world. It just might take a little longer, and I think that's people don't realize that, and they get frustrated. Well, they have a thought, and then they don't see action right away, and so they get negative, like you said, and then of course they see a negative outcome.
Yeah, you've got to keep, you know, continuously trying to. I'm not saying it's easy, right? You know, and it's not like, oh, Dorian's fucking all positive all the time, right? But I try to keep it the majority of the time, and if I'm getting frustrated or getting down, having negative thoughts, I try to check those before they get out of control and they start having too much influence. Yeah, I think you're talking about the double split experiment, yes. I think it's called. Yeah, and you know, they've got a ton of experiments. They've got like experiments where just talking to water is changing the molecular structure. Like if you say hate to water, it's all distorted, the structure. If you say love, it's, you know, it's got this beautiful geometric shapes, and you know, we're 70% water, so whatever you're telling yourself, it's going to have a huge effect on yourself, right?
Yeah, it's actually when they freeze the water, they freeze 2 tubs of water and they put hate on one tub and love on another tub, and it changes the crystalline structure. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, at the molecular level, what goes on. Dorian, what did you use? Because a lot of people out there might be in a similar state to where you were when you retired, felt lost. They feel like they don't know where they're going. They don't understand what the meaning of life is and why they're here. What modalities did you use for self-discovery and for uncovering, the truth about who you really were?
Well, I did a lot of reading. I started with the Bible and the Quran and religious things, and then I branched out a lot of books, and it almost got at some point overwhelming for me. And that's when I kind of put a little bit on the back burner of this stuff, and I was basically like, I need to have some fun, man. I need to relax and have some fun, because I've been doing this for so long, and I've been in a tunnel. I just need to kind of like put that on the back burner and have fun. So I did that for a while. Still kind of, tentatively looking into this and reading and so on, but it wasn't the main focus. That's come in the last probably 5 or 6 years, where I've known this is the path that I need to follow, just as strongly as I knew that I needed to do bodybuilding and I needed to, change my life with that. Now I need to be along the spiritual path and explore that, and use my platform that Mr. Olympia has given me to influence the world in a positive way, and to try to share some of the truths that I've found with people and help them on their journey. I don't want to be a guru. I don't want to be a teacher or nothing like that. I'm just saying, hey, this is what I've found, and this is what I've done, and just give a little tip to somebody to go on their own path. I think that's the thing. We all got to find our own path, and if what I'm doing and what I'm saying is helpful, then that's great. That's why I'm really, most of the reason I do these talks and podcasts is for that reason.
Now, Dorian, you were one of these guys that was like you said, super focused on bodybuilding. You did nothing else. You were like a machine. And all of a sudden, when you retire, people seeing you out like at these shows, at like after parties and the Sound Factory. Robbie Lopez has told us the stories about that. And it's like, you went the complete opposite direction. Now, I can relate to that because I did that a little bit of that myself when I got divorced. But explain to me some of the stuff that you experienced in going out, and some of the party drugs and stuff like that you did.
Well, it's like this, Dave. Like if you're on this extreme over here,
yeah,
right? It's like you got to swing almost over here to the other extreme, and then eventually the pendulum will find itself in the middle somewhere in balance. So yeah, I had my party days for sure, but even the party days were like somewhat disciplined. I was still maintaining like going to the gym, a good diet and all, so it wasn't like a trip to a junkie or something like that. But I remember I was in Vegas at show, I think it was a USA's or something like that. So I was there working a booth with the nutrition company I was with at the time, and Chris Cormier, that I was fairly friendly with, he came up and gave me this flyer for this party that was going on at where was it? The Luxor. That's it, the Luxor at Ra in the Luxor, a nightclub there. It's probably changed now, but anyway, I think it was about 2000, early 2000s. So Chris, you got to come to this party, and I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm not really like a party guy, but he gave me the flyer, and I gone back to my room later that night, and I don't know, I just started looking at this flyer. Oh, fuck it, man. Let me go down. I'm bored. Let me see what's going on here, So I went down to see Chris down there, and I think one of the girls, it was Chris, gave me like my first ecstasy tablet. Well, it was all uphill or downhill from there, however you want to put it. And I was there all night, fucking dancing with hot girls and stuff. I was having fun. So I made friends with Chris, and when I came to New York, Robbie took me out to the Sound Factory, and I've been to parties all around the world. I didn't even know there was a social scene after bodybuilding. There probably wasn't, like back in the 90s. Yeah. He had all these. It became this thing with all these after parties. Like Chris used to have them. Craig Titus and Kelly used to put on after parties.
Right.
All the bodybuilders used to go to Sound Factory. So there was a big bodybuilding party scene that I wasn't even aware of, that I became, I guess, part of as well. I mean, the Sound Factory was like, I mean, that place was fucking legendary, man.
Yeah.
People talk about this to this day. I mean, I'm from Europe, so we got Ibiza, that's probably the party capital of the world, Ibiza, right? You know?
Yeah.
And European people know how to party. But still, I haven't really seen anything like the Sound Factory. I don't know, it was like 3 or 4 floors. It was open like all weekend. I mean, all weekend. I used to see these bodybuilding guys, they come in like 7 in the morning and fresh and, you know, and come in, you know, take their pick of the girls and whatever. So I went to Sound Factory. There was all kind of freaks in there, man. Bodybuilders with no shirts on. Transsexuals, transvestites, what the fuck. I've seen some women in there. There's like the most beautiful women I ever seen. And then somebody's like, it's a dude. It's like, dude, huh? Like, how does a dude have a wrist that's like smaller than most girls? I mean, some of these like catwalk models, so could be confusing, but you know, we had Victor there and Robbie and everything, so
yeah,
to steer in a correct way. But I had some great times there in New York with the guys at the Sound Factory, Kamali, Rob Lopez, Victor Martinez, Titus was there, Janice James, Chris, like, you know, everyone was there.
Yeah. Dorian, you know, partying drugs, you know, having a good time was one thing, but then you took it to the next level. And I know you've talked about this on I think you talked about it on London Real, your experience with ayahuasca. Explain a little bit about that.
Let's make the distinction, yeah?
Yeah.
So you got party drugs. If you want my opinion on ecstasy, if it's real ecstasy, is MDMA. It's it's relatively safe. I'd say it's safer than drinking alcohol. Actually, they did a government survey in UK, and they came to that conclusion as well. So we used to go out, take a couple of ecstasy pills, and just drink water or orange juice or Diet Pepsi all night. So it was cool. And then, you know, you get guys get into the heavier stuff, and there was the big Nubain kind of thing that people were using recreationally, and then cocaine and stuff. So it was getting more serious. So I was mainly just a social party drug user, if you like. It was always controlled. It was always like, if I'm going out party, that's it. If I'm not, then, you know, I'm not. So it was, as far as the psychedelics go, this is a totally different thing. These are not drugs. These are like plant-based materials which give you a connection to the spiritual world, or to more of reality that you normally can't get through your 5 senses. So, you know, the things that we can sense and we can see is just a micro fraction of everything that's there. That's not just my theory, that's science. So what these psychedelics or plant materials allow you to do is to see more of reality, and also put you in touch with more of yourself and deeper parts of yourself and your psyche. And I think they can be absolutely very, very therapeutic for people. And they're teacher plants, they're for learning. So that's a totally different path, really, that I went on, probably starting about 5 or 6 years ago with some ayahuasca and DMT. And, you know, I've tried pretty much all of them in a kind of controlled way, and I found them massively helpful in my development and understanding of things.
Yeah, DMT is the drug that's in ayahuasca, which is an herb they get from the Amazon forest, and it's I guess the best way to put it, it's a journey. It's actually probably not something that some people would find enjoyable, because it opens up a lot of emotional doors that have been closed.
Absolutely, it's you know, it's not for fun. You shouldn't approach this thinking having fun. This is an experience, and it'll open a lot of things in your mind. You'll be able to see things from different perspectives. And I think for me, a good experience with ayahuasca is like, in one night, I feel like I benefited from that experience more than if I did 10 years of therapy. Not really, and you can do it in a couple of nights. But if you're not ready to like see things you don't want to see inside yourself, then it's not time for you to do it.
What did Dorian Yates discover about himself through doing ayahuasca and DMT?
It gave me different perspectives on things, different angles, and you know, the absolute knowing that there's much more to reality than we see, and kind of like a real loss of fear, you know, particularly fear of death. Yeah. Because I realized there is no death. It's actually an illusion. You know, the vehicle that you're using and you're having your experience through right now will expire at some point, but the essence of yourself will always be there. You know, it always exists. It's like energy can't disappear. It's got to exist forever.
Is that a comforting feeling?
Yeah, it's absolutely a comforting feeling that it's almost like I don't really have those questions about what happens to you when you die, because I've already been there, and I'm already there already, wherever that place is, because actually it's not separate. There is no time. There's an absolute, you know, time and space is an illusion. You realize that, and God is not something that's separate from you. You are God. At least an aspect of, you know. So when you do ayahuasca, you'll kind of get in touch or hear from your higher self, which I suppose is like God, but it's not. It's you as well. So there's no separation. There's no separation of anything. Actually, all separation is an illusion. So these are the things that I realized and I found useful.
Dorian, if someone wanted to experience this, what would you say was the best way you experienced it? Like, 'cause I know I went in California, I did an ayahuasca ceremony like at someone's house. It was very comforting, it was a very controlled environment. I felt pretty good doing it there. Some people have bad experiences with it. Where would you suggest people do if they wanted to try something like that?
Well, really, you need to be with a very good shaman or a teacher, somebody that has real experience of working with the plant and working with the energies and creating a safe environment. And you also need some integration after the ceremonies, because a lot of people do the ceremonies and you just like blasted into this other world, and all these things in your mind come to the surface, and then you go home afterwards. And a lot of people can't handle that, and they get sick or they get depressed or whatever, because they don't know how to process it. So I think it's important that you've got somebody that you can talk to afterwards and talk about the experience and go through it and so on. So there's a lot of people, because a lot of people now are curious, right?
Yeah.
Ayahuasca, DMT, what is it? And I'd like to have a go. You know, and unfortunately there's a lot of scammers out there, or a lot of unprofessional people. A lot of people ask me where to go, and I'll say, go to the guy that doesn't advertise. Well, how do I find him? I'm like, well, that's the dilemma, right?
That's part of the process.
So the guy that I do ayahuasca, his name is Guillermo Avarello, I think is how you pronounce it, and he's about 75 years old, and he's got a retreat in Peru, and he visits to Spain a couple of times a year and does ceremonies over here. So he's like one of the most experienced guys in the world. So I feel pretty safe doing it with him. I've done it once with another organization, and they were very professional and very organized. So you got to be careful, man, because at the end of the day, you don't even know what you're drinking if it's not a professional person. So not something to rush into.
What was the most painful thing you discovered about yourself, Dorian?
I didn't really discover anything that painful about myself. I think I already killed most of my demons years ago, you know. So it was more for me like reassurance that you're being supported, and I get support there, and some things that haven't really totally worked out yet, but I feel like I've been here a long time in various guises, and it's hard to say without sounding egotistical or arrogant, but I got something very powerful that I can utilize, and the bodybuilding thing was just like kind of scratching the surface a little bit of that, and that I'm able to do things that are more powerful in the future. Because anyway, bodybuilding is pretty much a very selfish activity, existence, but it's like I did that, and that's now given me a platform that I can reach other people and get a positive message across to them and help them on their spiritual path, which is where the world's at now. You know, a lot of people are waking up, getting more aware, they're asking more questions, and they happen to respect me or admire me or something like that, so they'll listen to it when it comes from me. So I feel that's kind of part of my role now. And I got a lot of, I go to shows now, to expos. Majority of the fans are coming up to me, they're like 20 years old. So these are guys that weren't even born when I was Mr. Olympia. So there's something, that I'm doing now that they're finding interesting and attractive. Of course, you got a lot of guys come into the sport, and they see the sport as now. Then somehow they're exposed to myself or Flex Wheeler or Kevin LeBron or, the guys from the 90s. And then they start going back and looking at these guys. Look at these guys 20 years ago. They look amazing. And who are they and what are they about and so on. So that's happening a lot.
When you speak the truth, it resonates with people, and I think that's why people feel that they have some kind of a calling to talk to you and to communicate with you.
Well, it's like I don't filter things. Whenever I do an interview, actually sometimes people ask me, and I always say no. Like, do you want to see the questions beforehand? No, I don't want to see them because I want my response to be in the moment, genuine. I don't want to plan my answers. And is there anything that we can't ask you? No, because I don't give a fuck. Ask me what you want.
Which brings us to the next topic.
Yeah, I'll just say, I don't answer that, but I can't believe there's really much that I don't see any point in. If you're going to do an interview, let's do it. Man.
Right.